In this video, I'm going to tell you about the built-in functions to your ActivPanel that are more worth knowing. There are some things in there that you'll probably never care about and that will never touch, whatever. But there are a couple things that are at least worth checking out once. First is the home screen. The home screen is just what you're looking at right now. It's just your basic wallpaper with the date and the time at the top. To access the home screen and everything else that I'm going to show you here, it's all through the app icon or the app dock, which can be accessed by clicking the small little up arrow on the bottom of your screen, or over on the left where you can see one, and then on the right as well. To show your home screen, just tap the little home icon. And no matter what is being displayed on your ActivPanel, it will override that and show the home screen. So that's probably something that you would want if your panel is on during a test or something. You can do that just as another clock. The next function is annotate. Annotate is right here, again in the dock menu. Annotate brings up a simplified annotation menu or a toolbar that no matter what is displaying on your panel, whether you're showing a YouTube video, a Word document, a website, you can annotate and draw on top of that on the fly. And this is the easiest way to do that. This toolbar is fully movable, so you just click and drag and move it around. You have a couple colors. You have a highlighter tool, a pen tool, eraser tools, a visibility tool, which makes your annotations kind of disappear temporarily or reappear if you tap it twice, and then of course undo and redo. Worth noting, you have the pen tool at the top here. If you tap it to select it and then tap it again, you have some thickness options. Same with highlighter. And then that is pretty straightforward. You draw, you erase, you undo, redo, whatever you got. And then you can close that. Something worth noting with the annotation tool, you can't save any of that. So it is meant for on-the-fly use. Just if you want to quickly direct students' attention somewhere, you have that at your fingertips. The next thing I want to highlight here is again in the app menu, and it is the whiteboard function. The whiteboard function, just keep in mind that this is completely independent of your computer. This has nothing to do with ActivInspire. It's got nothing to do with your computer, period. This is built into the panels software and the panels storage. So anything that you create here can be saved compared to the annotation tool, which is meant for on the fly. You could technically create pages that you save and reuse with students using this tool. So I'm going to go through the toolbar on the left side here to kind of tell you a quick example of what each of these things does. So going from the top, you have a settings menu where you can open previously made whiteboards. You can save current things that you're working on. You can, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Go back to whiteboard. The other option is to save. It's just another way to save. So if you're working on something, you want to save it, go ahead and tap that. I like dual user mode because what you do, you tap it once. It divides the screen into two segments. And notice that there are two toolbars at the bottom here. So if you have two students up here, each of them have their own color selectors, their own eraser tools, their own whatever, highlighter and pen. And you can have them working on two independent things. You don't have to have dual user mode enabled to have two people going at once, because notice that if I use two fingers, I can draw two lines. You could technically have 10 students up here drawing 10 different things if you feel like having them squeeze in. So dual user mode is just beneficial because it does introduce an additional toolbar for the second user. Working our way down here, we have this background tool, which if you tap that, it's actually right there. You have some different backgrounds for things like grid lines and graph paper, whatever, handwriting practice if your students need it. If you tap any of those, it'll change the entire background of your whiteboard. And if you go back to that, you can even change color. So if you wanted it to be, red grid, and then you can use white ink or yellow ink if you really want to get crazy. That's just a visual setting that you've got. I'm going to go back to white here. And then I'm going to change that background back to white so it's not so crazy red. The next thing is for images. If you change or if you want to add images to your whiteboards, you can load your own custom images to a USB drive and then plug it into the side USB port of your panel. That's how you can get your own custom images in. Or you can go from the built-in charts and templates that are already in here. I believe that there are quite a few. Well, I guess that's pretty much it. But what you see is what you get. If you see something you want, like polar graph paper, you can tap that, and then that inputs it right into your whiteboard. Next, we have the cursor tool, which is used to move things around. Pen tool, highlighter tool. Again, just tap them and tap them again. In the whiteboard mode, you do have 2 additional or 1 additional thickness or thinness setting. Just keep that in mind. It's kind of hidden. You just have to know to tap it and then tap it again. Color selectors, you have more colors in the whiteboard mode, and if you want to tap the palette, you have access to even more. You have the eraser tool and then the erase all function. A couple math tools, protractors, rulers, things like that. And it puts it in just like it did with the chart. And then undo and redo. That's pretty much it. So just to show you how to save this, if I tap the save button at the top, there's my saved whiteboard. And now if I would go back, I guess I could rename it down at the bottom here. So let's just say test. Check. At any point, if I would close whiteboard and want to go back to it, I can tap the 3 dots and go to open, and I can see my test whiteboard that I had just saved there and waiting for me to open it up at any other time. Even if I turn the panel off and then turn it back on the next day, that will still be there. All right. That takes care of the main things for your active panel that are on this quick menu here. So we had a couple things there, primarily with just those built-in functions, the home screen, annotate, and whiteboard. The only other things that I want to mention that are worth checking out, you of course can look at other stuff, but in the locker, I want to point out the spinner and the timer. So the timer is exactly what it sounds like. It pops a timer up on your screen that you can set and customize and start and stop, and it makes noises and all sorts of stuff like that. I want to point out here that it does, let me go back to my home screen. Home screen. All right, so here's a timer. You can see it's pretty easy, self-explanatory. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty with this, but you can set whatever time you want and then start it. When it's done, it will make a sound, but you can go to the settings here. You could change it from a digital to an analog timer. You can turn on and off sound if you want, and then you can move and drag this thing around however you'd like. You can do a full screen timer by tapping this option. There you go, much larger. You can condense it again. You can even add additional timers. So if you hit the plus, you have a second timer. One's blue, one's black. Add a third. There's a purple one. You can add up to 4 timers before it stops letting you add timers. So pretty neat in case you have 4 independent groups working on something at different times. I don't know. So that's the timer function. And one last thing about timers, when you do start it, it has a countdown as well as a visual representation of the time remaining with this red circle that, opens up. And if it's on analog mode, it's more like a clock. Okay, closing the timers. And the last thing I want to mention in this video is again in Locker, would be your spinners. Spinners take a little bit more time to set up, but there are some pre-made spinners. The one that opens by default would be your color selector. You just go ahead, so you can give it a spin. Yeah, there it goes. And the winner is blue. And that's your basic spinner, but that's not all it can do. You can go and change colors to any of the other preset things. You have names, consonants, alphabet, vowels, whatever. But all of these are fully customizable. If you use the pen tool or the pencil tool that appears to the right, you can adjust them, you can add things, you can remove things, you can remove everything and add your own stuff, or pretty much up to you. All right, let's go in settings here. Select item once and sound. Sound I would recommend keeping off unless you like the sound of a spinner. That's up to you. And you can also hit plus here to add additional spinners, so you can have multiple spinners going on at the same time. Again, it caps you at 4 things. And you can do full screen spinner, so it's much larger. I have 3 spinners open, that's why it's showing them all. And lastly, if you're doing your own customized spinner, notice here that there's an add item thing. It allows you to add up to 60 different things. So if you're trying to add your entire class, you can do that, unless you have a class that's more than 60 students. So I was happy to see that the limit is much higher than I thought it would be. Just remember, every time you change any of these, just always hit that save button, so that way your custom spinner will be there for you next time you want to use it.